emotionally immature parents in this episode, how to deal with it, what it looks like, especially with the holidays coming up. We thought this was a very timely episode. To start this episode, maybe we can start off with our general definitions of what it looks like to have an emotionally immature parent in your life, what it looks like to experience them over the holidays, what it looks like to experience them as you are with your spouse on the couch right now, getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner. It sounds like I'm a commercial right now, which is really cool.
Yeah, your tone is interesting.
I'm like,
Your cadence.
Yeah. I mean, to start, I would say that I said this in a different episode, and I'm just going to say it again because it's on my mind. But you can determine how dysregulated or anxious a child will be depending on how vulnerable the parent will be. If you have a parent that's overly vulnerable, then that's going to almost look like this histrionic, narcissistic parent that will change everything depending on how you feel. Your feelings are now, your fault. Their feelings are also your fault. If you are someone that gets assertive with them, you say, hey, this is my boundary. I'm not allowing this to happen. Then they're going to respond with, how could you try to destroy our family unit, right? Why? Look at your mother. She's crying, right? And then on the other end, if you have parents that are not vulnerable enough, it's very likely that that's also going to lead to a lot of anxiety, because with those kinds of parents, you never have any space to exist with emotion. So that's the experience of, hey, I'm angry. And then they look at you like, how could you be so weak to express that in the first place? We're going to tolerate you. And there's no space for communication. And so I think when it comes to family issues, the holidays and all these things coming up, if there's no space to discuss issues in either direction, that's going to lead to a lot of issues and a lot of heat between relatives.
I feel like emotionally immature parents, they have lots of loud emotions, but somehow they don't allow space for anyone else to have. There's a book. I mean, I feel like this phrase has become popular. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because of a book called "Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents." You ever hear that book?
Mm-hmm.
Who is it by? It doesn't matter. You can Google it. But it's a very popular book, and she basically outlines the basic characteristics of an emotionally immature parent, which is lack of accountability, emotional kind of avoidance, or emotionally dysregulated, and kind of not taking on the role of caregiver, and the dynamic sometimes becomes flipped or whatever. But it's funny, not to just jump into criticizing this book, but the book basically says, look, it's like a spectrum, right? And but on one end of the spectrum is just someone who's kind of never really figured their shit out but wants to, and is developmentally kind of not there, but maybe can get there. But on the other end of the spectrum is pure narcissism, but she never really calls it out, and she never really gets to a point of explaining, well, what does this mean if this person is narcissistic and they're your parent? And I think that it was an interesting avoidance of broaching that topic in that book. I'll just say that.
Interesting. No, I'm curious about that. That sounds really interesting.
Well, I'm reading it and I'm like, it seems like you keep looping back to basically treating these people like children, which in some context is necessary, but in other contexts, it feels like you're still doing this giving when the whole issue arose from the fact that you were forced to give when you didn't want to.
That makes sense. Yeah, you were forced to give when you didn't want to. It's sort of like you can't just exist and allow yourself to give out of just this authentic response.
Out of love. Yeah.
It's the control.
Mm-hmm.
It's control. And I think that's another big thing, right? Like with difficult parents, issues with that. It's never about, there's always something that's kind of underneath everything. I feel like if I don't do this, then they'll be dissatisfied. If I don't do that, there's like this string being pulled that if you don't respond to me in this way, then I'm going to humiliate you at the dinner table. I think that's one of the biggest issues with difficult parents, is that it can be like this gaslighting that happens behind the scenes.
And just to jump off of that, I feel like one of the biggest levers of control an emotionally immature parent uses on their child is the threat of disappointment. It's not so much that I will express disappointment. It's that I'm going to use that as a way to manipulate you out of expressing yourself in this way, exploring your identity in that way, because that's not the kind of person I want to be an extension of me. And ultimately, an emotionally immature parent to some extent views their child as an extension of them. And I always like to use this example, like an emotionally immature parent that kind of leans towards the spectrum of narcissism, they don't view their children as individual people. They kind of view them more as pets. It's like, you're this thing in my house. And the idea that a pet would ever pack their bags and move to Cincinnati for work makes absolutely no sense. Like, a pet is supposed to be by my side and ready when I would like to play with it. But if you have all of these desires that are not pet-like, then I'm going to get frustrated with you, use the threat of disappointment as a way to control you, and it's going to create this dynamic of resentment because the person on the receiving end of that never feels like they have any agency in their life.
Yeah, I agree completely. You feel like you are just an extension to them. And so if you finally grow outside of that box and then you go out and actually become something and do your own thing, then that becomes a disgrace to the family. How could you go out and become this or that? There's no support. But I think the natural process of families is that you start off as an infant in the unit, and then you learn the hopefully good parts of how they've come to raise you. And then as you get older, they sort of push you out the nest at the right time so that you can do something that was different. Some of the things that were the same, of course, but also some things that are unique to you, and they ought to take pride in that. So I think one thing to know, if you're dealing with a typical like parent that has some kinks but are like not kinks but like issues. That was really bad. If you're dealing with some issues, but then on the other end, you're dealing with parents that are completely difficult and out of the ballpark, a good question might be, how are they supporting you? Are they encouraging you to become your own person as you start to develop? Or does it seem like they're trying to fit you into the mold of what they thought was good, right?
Or do they find your desire to explore and grow as a threat to the system? Because I feel like it's usually like, if let's say your parents are together and there is an emotionally immature parent household, usually maybe both are emotionally immature, but one is really controlling the dynamic while the other is more enabling and feeding the dynamic. And you're born into a system where you don't know the rules, but you quickly learn that you have to accommodate usually one person who is often the most dysregulated. It's kind of like joining a workforce, and on the first day, someone kind of has like a yelling, someone starts yelling, and your coworker's like, oh yeah, you just kind of have to, just don't go around him after he's had his coffee because he gets a little up. It's like, oh, so there's like a whole workplace that is navigating one person, and it kind of takes up a lot of our emotional energy.
Yeah, definitely. Like, the regulation matters. I think a lot of people get caught up on.
That's a great t-shirt.
Yeah.
Regulation matters.
Regulation matters, because it doesn't matter what you say sometimes. It matters how you feel. And I think
that's on the back.
That's on the back. You're literally just making content.
I would totally make that fucking t-shirt.
You should. You would. You did it in a book title.
I always say, Nike has just do it, and our ego has stay stuck.
Just do it. Stay stuck. I would say, my shirt would say, just grow up.
Just grow up.
Grow up.
It's like a picture of like a disappointed parent, like just grow up. Or it's like a middle-aged man playing a Game Boy. Just grow up.
That's just a contradiction. Oh man, but that's fine to play a Game Boy too.
I mean, I just spent. Can I just tell you?
Yeah.
Just like, this is so stupid, but I just spent over I'll just say over $100 on a PS5 controller.
Dang, why? You have old one broke, or you just cool?
You just convince yourself you need something and then you do it.
It's worth it. It's probably worth it.
I was like, like I really feel like I can up my skill ranking if
you don't have that, you might not be the best, right?
Well, it has this setting where the trigger now is like a lighter touch, so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be like better at it.
That was the extra $50 there.
I played with this random dude, and
You met a stranger online.
I met a stranger online. I played with this random dude, and he told me about it, and I was like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna get that.
You got sold by a stranger.
Yeah. I like it.
No, but the thing I was thinking about was, this is probably good because it'll help you regulate, right? But if you're a parent, you have to be regulated in the room, like I think that parents are kind of going into situations and they're just thinking like, well, if as long as I follow this book about parenting and I do what's right by my kids and I work the job and make finances, whatever, it's like, yeah, that's great. But, if you come home and you're following all the rules, but you're dysregulated, then your kids are going to suffer because of that, And so I would always say that the most effective tool a parent can use is making sure that they're the most regulated person in the room on average. Like, it's okay to be dysregulated. You're not perfect. You're vulnerable just a bit, but you're also acknowledging that if there's an issue, if my child has a bad day, or if I lose my job or whatever, you come home and somehow you're regulated. And so how do I become regulated as an adult with a job, with kids that don't understand? Well, that's not something you can do by snapping your fingers. You have to build up to that. You have to take care of yourself. You have to be selfish sometimes. You have to be reckless, but you also have to be cautious, and I think a lot of parents miss that. And so then we go into all sorts of family gatherings and you become a difficult parent because you've never learned how to regulate. So now you wonder why your kids are talking to Aunt Sally about issues, but not you. It's because, you were using strategies, but you're the least regulated person the moment your kid brings something. Or even worse, you care about your child so much that when they bring something up to you, your fight or flight mechanism goes off so much because of how you care. And that's very kind and noble, but that kid's not going to want to talk to you sometimes because they know that by just saying one word, you can flip a switch. Just one word of their honesty. So, of course, when they, get a partner and then come home for the holidays, they don't want to talk to you that much, even though they love you.
That is so well said. It's so well said. I just developed a one question questionnaire to determine if you are an emotionally immature parent. Are you ready for it?
Ooh, let's hear it.
Okay. I would say you are highly likely to be an emotionally immature parent if you go to the child and say, hey, when something goes wrong, do you feel comfortable going to your parent? And if the child or the adult child says, no, I don't feel comfortable, it's likely that they have an emotionally immature parent, because what you were saying is, it's like they're expecting a dysregulation that then flips the dynamic, and then the child has to be accommodating the parent for the thing that they said that dysregulated them. And then the thing that they said that's distressing them becomes secondary, and maybe they even get punished for bringing it up.
Yep, exactly. That's a perfect question to bring that out. If you can, and you can go and be dysregulated in both directions, right? Like if your kid brings something to your attention and you feel like, okay, I need to fix this or whatever, like that's not okay. Like if it's too intense, but also if you're like completely like damning and you're like that you cannot do this ever again, right? Like that's bad too. Or if they come to you and you change everything about the world in a positive way, like, oh my gosh, my kid needs this, and then you go and you buy $5,000 worth of stuff for your kid, like that's running towards satisfying their needs, but your heart's still racing as you do it, like.
Well, I don't think it is running towards satisfying their needs. I think in that example, if a child's distressed and a parent just kind of buys a bunch of crap for them, it's more about soothing themselves than it is about soothing the child, because the child would go, look, this isn't really helping the situation actually, but thanks, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
The dysregulation, I feel like the dysregulation thing is the biggest factor in this whole podcast episode conversation, because like I was saying about that study I mentioned in a previous or future episode, depending on the order of how we release this.
Yeah.
It's true. So fun. I don't know why I find that so funny though.
I found it like a little funny, but not that funny.
No, I just the things that make me laugh don't really. but
you love randomness.
Yeah. But the research study I was referencing, it's less about it was about personality disorders, but the more important variable that determines an infant's lack of regulation and insecure attachment in adulthood was is the parent easily dysregulated? Because when the parent's easily dysregulated, all of the stuff that I was describing about affect mirroring and emotional attunement go out the window. I can't emotionally attune with you if I'm anxious,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like ultimately when I have some empathy for some, almost none, but some for emotionally immature parents, because in a lot of ways what they're selfishly trying to do is fix the lack of safety that they felt in childhood by flipping the dynamic and making their child their parent. And then they have these expectations of their child to do parent-like roles and regulate them, and the parent develops the actual parent develops resentment when the child can't do that.
Right. Yeah. The parents can be anxious because now the kids aren't fulfilling this adult-like role, right? Because, like, yeah, I agree 100%. If you have a parent that grew up in a household where the adult was like too authoritarian, then now the child's gonna walk away thinking, oh, I need to be a parent that's gonna be very, very passive. But you have some people that are passive parents that go so far in the direction and their kids dictate reality. And then the parent wonders, why do I feel so dysregulated when I'm with my kids? Why do I feel so bad? Well, it's because you don't have much authority in the room. Your shadow wound is anger and authority, and you gave your child a disservice by bending to their will every time. So now when you bend to your child's will, you give a 4-year-old the power to dictate reality. And of course you both don't like that version of reality. It was dictated by a 4-year-old. And so now you're living in that world and you're stressed out and your kid doesn't take you seriously. And then that turns into a positive feedback loop where now you're more stressed around the kid. Your dysregulation makes the kid more dysregulated as well. And now you keep giving them what they want and you keep giving. And then you resent the child. You resent this new authority in your life and you have anxiety, as a parent. It's an awful feedback loop and it's a disservice to the child, even though you're giving so much. So it's one of the hardest patterns to change because you have to realize that you've been working so hard literally for no reason and sometimes for bad outcome. But there's hope, I won't add, but there's hope.
There's hope, but I'm not going to say anymore. It's like this illustrates, this is like that. There's like a running joke in like TV and movies where it's like, oh, we let the passive permissive parent that it's like, we let him name himself. So here is Frankenstein Johnson. It's like,
that's perfect. That sums it up perfectly.
But this is kind of what I was getting at in the last episode or future episode. See, I'm going to keep saying it. It's called the Letterman style of making jokes where you just keep repeating it where it's not funny and then it is funny and then it's not funny and then it's really funny. We're at the not funny part.
You're a comedian.
But I'm a huge Letterman fan. But the whole thing about there are certain roles that a parent plays and certain roles that a child plays, and that continues into adulthood. And when the parent is emotionally immature, the issue with that is the roles somewhat become flipped and they start to expect parent-like things coming from the child. I'm distressed, you have to help me. I feel unsafe, make me feel safe. And the child then also loses that kind of sense of safety because like it's kind of like, hey, there's turbulence and the flight attendant is also scared. Am I the one who has to reassure the passengers that things are going to be okay? I'm number one, not equipped. Number two, I also feel scared. And number three, I've never been able to develop a real sense of safety myself. So how am I supposed to give it to you?
Exactly. And that's why a lot of parents who are overly cautious with their kids create avoidantly attached adults, because the kid is looking towards the facial expression of the parent. And then the parent looks like they're thinking, oh, there's impending doom if my child is unhappy. And now as the avoidant child, they're thinking they're like the pilot of their life and your life, and so now they have to, at baseline, become someone that uplifts the spirit of everybody, and it makes perfect sense. And I'm also thinking about like, well, with discourse in families, like what do we do with that? Like there's all sorts of different patterns that show up, and something that my mind is thinking about is like, well, a lot of times what happens is, or almost every time, unless you kind of live with your parents for your whole life, you at some point you go and you leave and you find a partner, spouse, or you stay single, who knows what, And then this thing comes up called the holidays where you revisit family or who knows what. And I think this is also an issue, but people are always surprised that conflict happens in families over the holidays. When in my opinion, I'm like, shouldn't you expect that? When you adopt a child into your life, shouldn't you expect that there's going to be a change in the system that's going to lead to a whole lot of differences and things you need to change? People prepare when they adopt a child, hopefully, and then they restructure their systems. But for example, when somebody meets a spouse, they get married and then they return to their home of origin where they've developed so many patterns and so many things. You're no longer the same version of yourself that you were when you left home, but when you come back, you expect everything to be the same. And then you go to pop psychology and you feel like, oh, wow, well, my parents aren't, suddenly I have a new person in my life and everything's wrong. Well, I'm like, oh, of course it's wrong. Like, how many arguments did you have to have with your spouse before things got on the same page with your relationship? So when you go on this long vacation away from family and then you come back, I think one reasonable thing to do is to anticipate that there will be fights with family. If you think that things are going to be perfect, then you're already losing the battle. You have to prepare. And so I guess that was my long-winded, hyper-focused way of bringing up the question to you, like, how do you, navigate family issues once you leave and then return for things like the holidays?
Well, I feel like the leaving I think oftentimes when someone leaves their hometown, finds a partner or whatever, their sense of reality adjusts. It's like, oh, we don't actually just ignore conflict and act like everything's normal the next day. We resolve it. Like you learn these things, then you return back to your home environment and you're back into a state of not acknowledging issues and sweeping things under the rug. But because you had that departure, you're no longer as okay with it. And you no longer tolerate the mistreatment because of the way it affects your sense of self-worth. And I think that's oftentimes when you add into the mix an emotionally immature parent who can't take accountability, you're going to be looking for resolution by asking them to take accountability for whatever issue they're causing. And that's not going to happen. You're going to somewhat be, constantly frustrated with this lack of growth with a certain group of people who don't really want to grow. It's not comfortable for them to grow.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like a really good dividing line too, right? Like this episode, we're talking about parents that are very difficult. And you can know that you're going in the direction of dealing with a difficult parent if there's literally no willingness to accept who you are and how you've changed.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. And then on the other end, I think you have difficult dynamics where like there's some willingness to sort of like figure things out, but it's like, yeah, you're a new person and there's some healthy things. And I think there's sort of like life can be sort of like a relay race where there's this generational growth happening. So in some senses, like, oh, of course, there's some ways you've changed in a positive way. And then you come back home and there's some things that feel weird to parents because like you're teaching me things that like, you're my child, right? But you're more healthy than me. But it's like it's this respect of like, well, you open the door to that and let's see if we can bring you there. But I think with very unhealthy parents, it can look more like there's just a stone wall of like, you are not budging our family system one bit.
As I was talking, I had the image of hitting up against a wall, but I just didn't say it. So it's funny that you said it.
And our analogies connect, see?
But the I feel like the deepest root of the issue with an emotionally immature parent comes from the beginning. When if I were to have a child and I was an emotionally immature parent, I would start under the false premise that because I brought them into this life, they are eternally indebted to me. They owe me from the start because I gave them life. When I think and I think all of the issues that come with emotionally immature parents comes from that false belief. I think the more true belief is you brought this person into the world against their will, and you are now indebted to them for the rest of your life. And if you didn't want that assignment, you shouldn't have signed up for it.
Wow. You are the difference between those two. You are consuming. And then in the second example, you are giving.
So in the first example, what that looks like in a specific moment, it's like if I was the child coming to a parent who believed I owed them everything and said, hey, I'm upset with you for the way you said this thing. Be like, how ungrateful are you to even ask for something from me? You're the one who should be giving me something.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
I know that resonated with a lot of people. Like that line. How could you be so ungrateful?
And it's
Yeah.
it's crazy because I think that attitude, it creates this sense of obligation in the child that ultimately kind of fucks with their sense of guilt. Like, I think a lot of children of emotionally immature parents have I would say an inappropriate amount of guilt in them, and they constantly feel like they're a bad person doing bad things and hurting people, but it's only because they've been given this sense of responsibility over the life of someone who was supposed to be responsible for them, you know?
Yeah, and that's what breeds a lot of attachment issues in kids, right? Like you come back home and then now there's no understanding at all. So of course, now with anxious attachment, you have a fear of being misunderstood. Is because you've grown up in an environment where the climate was at baseline. We won't understand what's going on in your world. Not all the time, you know. Sometimes it can be preoccupied, and your parents are just 100% obsessed with your world, and then you go out into the world and there's all that. But yeah, in a lot of cases, yeah, I think the parents really make it so that you don't there's no understanding at all, and there's this it's just consuming. I want your reality to look this way versus that way.
Yes, it's consuming. There's and when it's consuming, you're also single-minded. Like like you said, the fear of being misunderstood. I think an emotionally immature a child of an emotionally immature parent, as an adult, becomes very fearful that people will misunderstand them, but only because their actual parent, it's not that they couldn't understand them. They were committed to misunderstanding them because it allowed their agenda to keep moving forward.
Wow.
If I were to fully understand you and see you for what you are, and let's say your sexuality means you might not, I mean, it really doesn't, but let's pretend it means you might not actually have kids. And that's really important to me because I want to become a grandparent. I am going to, on some level, express dissatisfaction with the fact that you are the way you are,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. In the worst case is if it's indirect. I would say like you have no idea why they're frustrated with you, but all along it's this in the back of the mind. They're never willing to admit it.
I work with a lot of gay men, and I think this is just me selfishly saying this because I can't speak for any of their personal experience, but the stories that piss me off the most are the ones where the parents still have Thanksgiving dinner, but they just don't ask about certain things in your life.
Oh,
Because then it puts the burden of responsibility on, let's say you're a gay man, it puts the burden of responsibility on you to either go and hide parts of yourself, go and not hide parts of yourself and feel the pain of judgment and rejection, or not go and feel guilty for the fact that they didn't actually have some knockdown, drag 'em out fight with me. It's just this like kind of quiet Southern, nobody speaks of the thing, you know?
yeah. And it puts the child in a position where they have to take care of the parents. And there's just baseline shame. I have to make sure that I'm careful about what parts of myself I expose to you as a gay man. And then now I feel like, wow, my literal identity is something that I can't have exist with you, and you can't nurture it, right? You never could nurture it. So there's this, if there's anything about you that you feel like can't be nurtured by your parents, especially since childhood, that automatically puts you in the role of having to be the caretaker, because now you're filling in the blanks of what your parents are thinking and thinking, how do I protect their ego? How do I protect their judgment of me, their perception of me? How do I project myself out into the world in a way that's acceptable? And then you find those clients can be so filled with shame
Totally.
once they pop into the world, you know?
I have another one question survey.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is more of a thought experiment, but if you're wondering if your parent is emotionally immature, I want you to visualize, those like little arrows on a weather channel report. It's like, oh, the wind's kind of going this way, right? It's like going in this direction, all these tiny little arrows, right? So in a relationship with a parent, you have all these tiny little arrows going towards them and all these tiny little arrows going towards you from them. And this is these arrows represent emotional accommodation. How much am I emotionally accommodating you, and how much are you emotionally accommodating me? And if you can visualize what that looks like for your parent right now, and you have a ton of arrows going towards them and just a few going towards you, I have good news for you. You have an emotionally immature parent. Because the reality is, and you might go, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the reality is the proper dynamic when you have a parent is that they're emotionally accommodating you way more than you're emotionally accommodating them. And if it's not the case, you're more likely to be best friends. You're more likely to be begrudging their existence. There's a lot of resentment that's possible. It's just a bad time.
I agree. That's a perfect way to depict it. How much is your parent protecting you versus how much are you protecting them? And if it started at the earlier that stuff starts, the more impactful I think it is. Like if those arrows are hitting you at 3 years old, right? And you are somehow having to take care of the expression of your parents. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of parents who go into having a kid while they're extremely dysregulated and have an awful life, who knows what might happen? Maybe they were traumatized and it's not necessarily a moral flaw on the parent's part at all. But for whatever reason, if the parent is extremely dysregulated and the kid enters the world, the child will begin to take responsibility for making things right, just naturally.
We talked about this a lot. It's just a pure instinct for a child to blame themselves when things are going wrong because it makes them feel like life is more predictable than it is. Parents get divorced, it's my fault until proven otherwise, you know?
Exactly.
And I feel like we're just if you look at the spectrum of like, okay, so with 5 minutes left, what is how are you supposed to what are you supposed to do with this information? It's like and the answer would really be determined by where your parent exists on the spectrum of emotional immaturity, you know? If they're towards the end of narcissism, if they're closer to that, then estrangement might be a better option for you. But if they're towards the other side, then just being able to assert healthy boundaries and knowing the ways in which you abandon your sense of self for them might be enough to satisfy. But I think ultimately it's really about checking in with your own sense of self and asking like, what do I have to do to protect myself from feeling like I have to accommodate this person at my own expense? That's really kind of the basic question.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, right? Like you make sure me in my home, like, right? Like as I am, am I being filled up? Is my cup filling up? And then you look towards your family of origin. You see, are they emotionally unhealthy? I love how you did that. I agree. Like if they're emotionally extremely unhealthy, I have this much water to give. And if they are emotionally more healthy, but like every family has issues, I have less water that I need to distribute to them, and I can fill myself up. And you just keep going and basing it on that. And if you can really jump in and continue to live in that way, that is how you really restore the balance. So if you're dealing with someone who's emotionally immature as a parent, then strong boundaries, just like any abusive relationship. And if you are dealing with a family that has issues, but it's not emotionally abusive and it's more similar to most issues, then I would say it's very helpful to check how much you can give in those situations, but and acknowledge that it can be self-sacrificial, right? Like you've gained a lot of wisdom in life, and there's a lot of good respect that can come of like you brought me a lot and you're still loving me, but there's some ways you're falling short because you haven't experienced the world, and you created opportunity for me to learn these things. And so then I would say a lot of people, for example, with anxious attachment, right? Like you have a really hard time tolerating any kind of misunderstanding, and you come back home after several years and you expect everything to be good and you expect perfect understanding because you've learned what perfect communication looks like. And then you just bash your parents because they feel like they're not communicating with you like perfectly good adults. And I would say you really need to challenge that, because as an anxiously attached person, now that you're adult, you're also assuming some sort of authority to move around just a little bit of the ego of parents because you know that you're investing in something that's more long term. They've done that for you, and now you can sort of move around and realize that I don't need to be perfectly on the same page with my mom or dad that I haven't seen in 10 years, right? Eye to eye at least. And so if you can learn to regulate and build a relationship slowly, then you won't sacrifice your relationships with your parents, but you also won't sacrifice your relationship with your spouse in the same time. Like, I think it's extremely nuanced, but I can see that spectrum making a big difference.
That makes me think of this quote by Rupert Spira, where he says the best relationship you can have with your parent is one where you stop asking anything from them. And that quote kind of annoys me in some way, but it also feels profound in another, because when you're on the low end of the emotionally immature spectrum, when you stop asking for things that they can't give you, you might improve the relationship significantly. But to apply that quote to the other end of the spectrum, when you fully stop asking anything from them, what you might be left with is, I don't really want to be here then. And I think that's okay too. And I often find people that are on the far end of the spectrum, the narcissistic end, they feel like hung up with the guilt of like, I don't really have much interaction with them anymore, but I feel like I need to forgive them. I think that's like the last thing, and then I'll feel better. And I really don't really like the concept of forgiveness with particularly abusive people, because you can't really forgive someone who doesn't acknowledge they harmed you. If you are not going to acknowledge that you've harmed me, then there is no resolution, because you're going to keep doing it in some way or another. And so me forgiving you is basically just me giving you a key to rob my house again. And I think ultimately, if you really want to get unstuck in that context with the more abusive side of emotional immaturity, you kind of have to look at the ways in which you can't forgive yourself, because I think that's where you're probably more hung up.
Wow. I think that probably speaks to a lot of people, and probably a good way to probably wrap up too. I don't know. I can't see the clock, but I have so many thoughts.
We just hit 80. So
come on, man. My emotional.
Say your last thing
clock.
if you got something.
I think, yeah, I like that idea about forgiveness. Like, if you can set boundaries and then maintain your health from a distance, I think that's what pops into my mind. When I think about forgiveness, I also do think about like the faith piece of like people that have done these great acts, I guess, of forgiving their enemies and all this other stuff. And I abide by that, but I also think that the definition of forgiveness probably is different for me and you, where it's like the boundary needs to exist. This person has an emotional cancer. I need to stay behind this wall, but because I, of whatever reason, I love you from a distance somehow, but anyways, that was just another thought and I have like 100 other thoughts about something else you said, and I can't even remember what those thoughts are.
We have a similar, I think, definition of forgiveness. I just am also using the other definition because I think a lot of people look at it more as like, you're good. It's like, no.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, you want to wrap up here?
Let's do it. Yeah.
I kind of have to use the restroom.
Go ahead. I think I kind of have to as well.